Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fabric Spotlight, a series of talks on everything cloud and infrastructure, enterprise, etc. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Yousuf Khan, partner at Ridge Ventures. Hello, Yousuf. Thank you very much for joining today. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Prabakar. Really good to make this happen and really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So you had a very interesting career. I was just looking at it, a life, I would say. Africa, London, here, it's really nice. So, and recently you have made the transition from IT CXO roles to being a partner at a VC firm. So I think it would be very interesting if you could share your journey, how you got here, the experiences that have shaped your life and career. Very interesting for the audience.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think without going into too much group therapy, but I will probably give you probably a little bit more. And it's been a character building journey, to be perfectly candid with you, but one which is, I have zero regrets in life. I think that probably the biggest piece is I've been an operator for the last 2 decades. I call myself the accidental CIO because I was, started basically my work in technology. And a summer job at a startup. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, hey, it's good to basically make sure that I can have some sort of income, which never hurts when you're a poor student trying to basically make it in the world. But I just kept getting other jobs in the industry. It's something I was very intellectually curious about. So over time, as someone who was trying to get out of IT, I ended up becoming a CIO, not once, not twice, but 5 times over.
Yeah.
And in that role, basically holding, lots of operating roles, managing teams and global functions. And, throughout that entire journey, I always worked with startups in some way, shape or form. It was just either as a customer or an informal advisor or helping a VC in some sort of feedback or diligence. And so as a result of that, I just decided that, after my last role, I sort of got into the zone that I really wanted to help find and advise and help build and invest in the next generation of companies. And, I've always been excited by the venture industry and decided to basically make the switch, and very excited to basically be here at Ridge.
All right. Welcome to the venture world, I guess. So, I think it would be great if you can talk a little bit about Ridge Ventures, the sectors, the segments, the stages that Ridge focuses on, and what you are specifically looking into.
Yeah, so Ridge focuses fundamentally on enterprise companies, and we typically do late seed Series A investments. Our focus is to be able to work pretty consistently with repeat founders. We've seen that having worked with lots of companies where we invested in a founder's first company. Those founders we're very lucky that they came back to us and wanted to partner with us again. We also focus pretty much across a number of different spaces, both in terms of infrastructure. We invested in a company like Fastly, for example. We've looked at spaces in data security and privacy and compliance with companies like InCountry and Horizons 3. And then we, of course, look at SaaS and kind of where the future of both infrastructure and software is going. And can we be involved at the foundational level with companies like Rafe, which is focusing on Kubernetes, or look at vertical SaaS solutions like MaintainX, which is disrupting or being able to help entire industries which haven't really been adopting as much software and innovation as possible by being able to actually build software solutions in those vertical SaaS solutions. I think the easiest way to explain my role is I'm just a monumental nerd. And I basically try and take the opportunity to look at a number of things. And I also then helps me to filter and figure out what not to do. But yeah, we've been amazing partnership, a group of funds we've had. We're now investing out of our 4th fund. Just exciting times for us for all intents and purposes.
Well, there's no shortage of nerds in Silicon Valley, so I'm happy to be one of them as well.
But not many of them wear a sweater vest to work every single day. So Prabakar, you've got to understand.
Like, yeah, not many
of us out. Yeah, right. There are not many of us out there. Yes, absolutely. I can neither confirm nor deny that I'm a candidate for cover of the nerd magazine. But yes, that's me. Welcome.
Right. Okay, there's always different kinds.
Yes,
Okay,
totally.
so the interesting thing about you is that you kind of like you are at a venture from now, but you have made the switch most recently from being an enterprise IT CXO. So as we proceed with this discussion, it would be good if you could kind of like give your perspectives from both sides of the coin, like being a CXO as well as being an investor.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that on one condition, that you go and ask me any questions about networking, because I'm sorry, but I say this with respect. Well, I'm intimidated. I'm intimidated by you, by your background, your and Raj's background in that world and ecosystem. And I just contributed to buying stuff that you were part of basically building out, which
Ah,
I hope you're grateful for.
well,
But
thank you
outside of
very
that,
much.
I'm happy to have the conversations. But your
Yeah, we'll
expertise
just
in areas of infrastructure, I
we'll,
respect very much.
yeah, for networking, we'll just limit it to people networking in LinkedIn or something.
Okay, I'll stick to that. Sounds great. Sounds like a lot of fun. Great.
Okay, all right. So, I said, yeah, both perspectives. So, we have seen that, of late, especially with pandemic and all of that, enterprise adoption of the cloud is really accelerating. How do you see it playing out? Do you think that public clouds are going to completely take over? It will be hybrid cloud. What about multi-cloud? What's your
Yeah,
prognosis?
no, yeah. So my viewpoint on this is, having basically bought hundreds of solutions in the infrastructure space, on-prem, virtualization, storage, compute, and network. My belief is that we're going to be living in a hybrid world for many, many years to come.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Look, I've worked for a great company on the storage space
Hmm.
with Pure Storage.
Yeah.
I've also, of course, therefore been been on the security side with a company like Qualys, and also worked
Right.
for startups and serving customers. And the typical tentative viewpoint is that I think we're going to be living in hybrid cloud for a number of reasons. Number one is, I think workloads and applications, are differ and are becoming more complex. And there's a lot of legacy out there, number one. And so thought process about being able to move those into cloud require refactoring, entire re-architecture of those applications. So there's an aspect of being able to think about those. Second, data security, compliance, all of these things start to basically come into place, especially where data is a major factor of being able to figure out whether this application moves into place. Cost, security, all of these things in place. I think the people piece, people just don't take for granted. This is an enablement deficit in the cloud space, and therefore, whilst there's no bigger fan of the public cloud infrastructure space than probably myself. Fundamentally, people need to be able to run, manage, be able to deploy, secure, integrate all of these applications in place. So I think it's going to be a mix of kind of hybrid cloud, private cloud, for many, many years. And I think that's also been the case because you've seen a lot of the public cloud providers adopt that thinking in some of the acquisitions they've made, in some of the product releases they've made, especially during last year. And I see that pretty consistently. And I looked at that several years ago when I was at Pure Storage and I was speaking to customers. And so I come from that vantage point in terms of some of the factors that affect a decision making when it comes to cloud.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's a good point. Enablement deficit. That's a term that I
Yes.
should use. That's a very interesting term. Thank you
I
for that.
appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
So adoption is going on, but you mentioned a couple of the issues. What do you think about specifically security as a cloud inhibitor? Is that going to ever go away? Your experience as a CXO and what innovation opportunities you think, especially for more the cloud native microservice type modern apps.
Yeah, look, I think on the security side of things, I don't think it's going to go away. And I don't think that's not because I don't think it's a reference point problem, right? I don't think there's this kind of a silver bullet to this. The way we need to think about security, having led security teams in previous roles, is the fact that you've got to think about threat vectors becoming more complicated and more sophisticated over time, right? Several years ago, we didn't really speak about ransomware, right? It wasn't really in the mainstream of conversation. Now it's kind of near the top of agenda. It's a big fear factor that comes into place. If you think about, and then as software and applications have kind of moved and evolved into new architectures, new techniques, new solutions, new platforms, everything from microservices and onwards, all of those need have a very, very different vantage point. You have to look from a different vantage point to secure those. And so therefore, companies like, for example, StackRox will lead in some cases when it comes to, Kubernetes security. So as you look at each of aspects of your infrastructure, securing them, managing them, monitoring them, maintaining them, and then of course integrating them from a security vantage point is a very, very mammoth task. And so I think solutions will start to evolve in each of these different sectors from time to time. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think what's going to happen is it's going to become a little bit more easier with a lot of the compute technology in place that's happening to be able to at least make it more automated. Because fundamentally, a lot of these threats are automated and coming into a company's infrastructure. So that's one piece. And I think a second piece is, look, there is probably much more awareness about it. Cybersecurity is now discussed at the audit committee of board of directors, companies that I've basically been present in and presented to. So it's definitely there. The investments are increasing. And therefore, it's, as I always tend to say, security is everyone's problem. It's not just a security team's problem. It actually applies across the board. So as you enable more people within a company, within an engineering function, within an IT function, you start to solve it and get better at it as well. And so that's the other piece that hopefully the enablement deficit there starts to close up, mainly because it's a forcing function. You start hearing this in the headlines in the press all the time. You start to wake up to that. And I think that's what's happening in enterprises from my standpoint.
Interesting. Yeah. Security as an overall process. That's a good point. So to just slightly a little bit, what do you think about innovation opportunity in the parallel field of monitoring and management and automation there, for particularly for these modern applications, cloud native applications, Kubernetes? You mentioned Kubernetes a couple of times. Do you think AI ML can play a role in creating that ability to automate?
Yeah. At the high level, the opportunity for AI and ML solutions in the infrastructure stack is to be able to deliver much more automation from a lot of the data that's being ingested when it comes to monitoring, right? And so my viewpoint is, if you're able to make better decisions across your infrastructure stack from a management maintenance standpoint, by being able to deploy out an AI and ML solution, or at least a mindset towards that, then I think that's where the bigger opportunity is. Number two is, if you think about threat vectors and performance optimization of the actual stack, could you be able to be a little bit more directive with an ML-based solution that allows, kind of self-driving kind of optimization to come into place? I think that's definitively probably the case. I think the third piece is, look, I think DevOps teams, engineering teams, IT teams are overloaded, and there is alert fatigue, and that's been going on for many, many years. And so somewhere down the line, there has to basically be a much bigger drive to be able to filter out and to be able to direct priorities for a lot of these teams which are overwhelmed. And I think the only way to really do that is to basically look at an ML-based solution that drives that. So I think that thinking is starting to basically get embedded. I think some of the solutions have this in place, embedded in their thinking. Sometimes they don't call it ML. I think it's, it's a different way of basically looking at it. But I'm bullish in trying to look at how this could better serve, resource-constrained infrastructure teams, which are probably taking on more workload than they've ever had before. If you think about the acceleration of cloud transformation, the workloads that are basically being migrated into cloud, products which are being driven by software and workloads, DevOps teams are fundamentally under-resourced, and they're not being able to give the investments in some of the tools that they wish to basically make. So, hopefully they basically get those, and they're better served by solutions which do have ML embedded within them.
So we talked about the cloud adoption, whether public clouds are going to completely take over. But the interesting corollary to that is there seems to be more decentralization talk, where people are saying that, it's not going to be just centralized public clouds anymore. Telcos seem to be coming back and saying, we are going to be the edge cloud. What are you seeing in this? Is there a trend towards decentralization? Can telcos come back? What are you seeing from your venture standpoint?
So look, I think from both a venture standpoint and the vantage point of being able to speak to CIOs, I think it's still too early. I don't think there is I think there's a definitive path. I think what's happening now more than anything else is, as I said earlier, one of the things that are happening is there's a much greater demand to be able to prioritize investments which are going to be able to generate revenue on the product side. Those investments and that product kind of mindset in terms of execution is going to be driven by software and being able to kind of revitalize and rejuvenate sort of product streams by being able to drive by great software optimization. With that in mind, you fundamentally need to think about the best path to be able to get there. And that's going to be looking at the options that are available to you, whether it's going to coming in from the telcos or the public clouds. And you have to basically make your decisions on a number of different vectors. Number one is you've got to think about execution. Number two, you've got to think about security. And number three, you actually have to think about distribution, right? Like, what is the optimal way to be able to make sure that you're able to get a product out to market and get revenue from it. Overlaying all of this is about the customer experience. And I talk about the fact that people compete in this experience economy because customer experiences are now becoming very unforgiving. And so when you think about an application, when you're wanting to be able to put this, and it's key to your product, think about mobile apps and online commerce and even enterprise companies which are trying to do things like self-serve otherwise. The customer experience is absolutely critical. And so to be able to get to that, again, it's not a definitive answer because I think it's still very early. I think people are still trying to figure out what the best path is. Once they get a playbook, they'll basically move towards that. And I think there's a lot of options on the table for CIOs to do that.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that Edge Cloud itself is too early, but there may be some opportunities to provide better customer experience.
It's a definitive. So Edge Cloud is going to help drive a much better customer experience.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, it's very clear that people are looking at the edge in a way to be able to figure out what the optimal a path is for them to be able to sort of execute on it. And it's definitively an area of interest. I would say probably top 5 priorities for CIOs is probably there from an aspect of intellectual curiosity and also being able to figure out what an execution looks like. So that's where it comes from.
That's good perspective. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm representing the monumental nerds as well as the operators, and sometimes they're both in between. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So are you have you had occasion to look into, or are you looking into now this IoT from industrial IoT perspective as well as the enterprise, what people are calling the enterprise IoT, various devices that are in various campuses and things like that. What are your thoughts on that front?
I'm very excited by the IoT space, and I've been for a little while. I think that the concerns with IoT have fundamentally centered around security, and I think that's one of the things which have prohibited a lot of people to be able to do a mass scale in terms of deployments. I think there are a number of great companies out there focusing on IoT. I think what I would basically say is the ones which are focusing on a very clear vertical business outcome, they're going to do super well. Sensors in very specific industries for, say, workplace safety or optimization of, say, real estate using sensors, those sort of things that I've definitively seen great work in. When I think about enterprise security, or sort of enterprise IoT, I definitively see that as a use case. And I see growth in that, and I think companies are going to do super well. And the reason is very simple, is a lot of the legacy, that infrastructure that's been in place is, to be able to get telemetry data from there is really, really hard, number one. Number two, not being able to figure out how to be able to sort of optimize that and optimize your process also is really, really hard. And I think IoT is going to be able to drive that effort. The question really comes down to is, what does a good IoT kind of plan strategy look like? And that's really, really difficult to define. And how do you be able to make sure that you're able to secure it? And of course, get people to be able to support it. If you think about IT teams, you're able to deploy out applications, you're able to deploy out infrastructure, you've got reference points, experience, you've got conventions, and you've got places to go to from knowledge, etc. IoT in some of these other places, it's still very early for people to get not just enabled, but be able to get confident and be able to sort of move forward. So I think, but I can be very excited by all intents and purposes.
Yeah, there's a lot of consumer side as well with home and personal monitoring, telehealth, and stuff like that. So it's it's an interesting space for sure.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I've been the CIO of multiple billion-dollar companies, and I still am the CIO of my own household. And nobody raises IT support tickets in my home. Basically, people just typically shout for IT support. So I do provide IoT support of some way, shape, or form. And so I hope that there is a better support mechanism for IoT in enterprises as a result of it. So yeah.
Okay, all right. That's an opportunity, folks. So, so yeah, kind of like coming to the towards the end of our discussion here. You have had a lot of exposure to new ventures, entrepreneurs. Now with Ridge Ventures, you would have a lot of insights from the successes that you have seen and perhaps some failures as well. So if you could share some advice to the entrepreneurial audience that we have of what are the success tips and some pitfalls to avoid, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So first of all, you've picked me up in ways that I really appreciate. I hope I hope you still have that opinion after I answer this question and that we continue to work together. But look, it's no big secret. I've been an informal advisor to several companies. I've been an advisor to quite a few. I've been the first design customer to many. And at the very least, I've been able to look at number of pitches as a customer from that vantage point. Look, my advice generally comes from a couple of places in being involved in working with both VCs, startups, and operators. And I think it boils down to a few things. Number one is work with the firm that's going to be able to add value and be able to provide you with the expertise that you need to be able to be a successful company, right? I think the Fabric team have got a depth of expertise, and you've understood a landscape super well, and you've been helpful to your portfolio companies. We've been able to do that ourselves on Ridge. We've been able to build a very good brand, and our team of Alex Rosen, Camille Syed, Brandon Baker, and Pat Kennedy, they've got a ton of experience in being able to work with companies at multiple stages, and so we want to be able to add value. So pick your partner closely from one vantage point. I think the second piece is think about design partners early in your startup journey. I think people don't think about this enough. They think, well, as long as I get an intro to a CIO, I'll be absolutely fine. Think about the fact that they need to be a good customer, that they'll be forgiving, candidly speaking, you don't have a fully fledged product. And think about and that is the true partnership that most companies really, really don't spend enough time on. Third, and probably most importantly, take time to figure out your story. And by story, I basically mean think about the company that you're building, the impact that you want to basically have in a particular industry, and probably most importantly, the solution that you're basically providing. The problem that you're solving is absolutely important, right? If you think about your end customer, whether it's a CIO, a CTO, a VP of engineering, otherwise, fundamentally, you're competing for mind share. And you need to be able to say, we have understood this problem based on all of the data we've seen. And I think a lot of startups don't basically focus on this enough. Right. And I think, the fourth thing is make your ask, right? I think really try and actually come up with a list of things that you need, instead of putting all on your shoulders, and start to work with the partners around you, both VCs, advisors, and otherwise, to be able to get the help that you basically need. A lot of founders don't tend to do that. And it's totally fine. You're trying to build a company, you're very heads down and focused, but try and look up a little bit, especially in the world that we live in right now, and be able to basically reach out and ask for help. And so those would be my core pieces of advice.
Well, Yousuf, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. And audience, thank you all for watching. Please stay tuned for another episode of the Fabric Spotlight. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.